Hi, this is Patrick O'Reilly from the Vintage Video Podcast, and you're listening to Pop Goes Your World.
If you haven't already, subscribe on iTunes. And while you're there, please leave us a rating and review.
And now it's time for our feature presentation.
I'm Chris McBrien, and the pop culture from Generation X is everything to me.
And I'm Derek Myers, and I'm here to educate Chris on the great pop culture of today's generation.
Episode 261, The Effect of Social Media on Pop Culture. I'm Chris McBrien along with Derek Myers, and this is Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations. Now, this week we're going to take a look at the impact and the effect, really, that social media has had on pop culture. For an old guy like me, this should be very interesting. This should be a good topic for sure. But before we get around to that, what is new in the world of pop culture for you, Derek?
Hey, Chris. Well, I only had an opportunity to see a couple of things this week. We just came out of the long weekend. It was Canada Day here in Canada, and then yesterday was July 4th, Independence Day in the U.S. So we had a weekend of some fun and activities. We had some friends visiting from the U.S., so a lot of social activities going on, not a lot of sitting down watching TV kind of activities, but I did manage to see a couple of things. Cool. My wife and I managed to get out to the theater and see Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, Indiana Jones 5, or also known as Indiana Jones and the Last Paycheck.
This should be interesting. How do you like it?
I liked it. I liked it. I mean, Raiders of the Lost Ark set a pretty high bar for movies in general, so no sequel will ever live up to it. And this one certainly didn't. I mean, it's impossible for a movie to reach that height. But I did enjoy it. It's really long. It's like over 2.5 hours. I do not think it needed to be that long. I would have tried to trim about 20 or 30 minutes out of it. But no, it was good. It introduces a couple of new characters. It sort of takes it in a slightly different direction. But it's very clear that this is the send-off. This is the goodbye to the character. Without spoiling any major details, the beginning of the movie, Harrison Ford's character is being thrown a retirement party by the university where he teaches. Like they clearly indicate as a part of the story that he's old, he's past his prime, he's, and that's a part of the theme of the movie is like, you're a teacher of archaeology that teaches people about old things that are past their prime, and now you are an old thing past your prime. And that really is sort of a theme that runs through the movie. And so with that in mind, although they do have him doing Indiana Jones types of things, they really play up the part that he is old and is not as limber as he might have once been. But it works. I mean, that's absolutely the point of why they did certain things the way they did certain things. But no, I enjoyed it. I was glad I saw it in the theater. I don't think I would have liked it any more or any less if I watched it at home for the first viewing. But Indiana Jones is such a big part of my movie history. I couldn't imagine not going to the theater to see it. So anyway, that was the only new movie we saw.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Did you like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull?
No, I did not. But
I didn't see it. I refused to watch it.
Yeah, so I've been listening to a lot of podcasts over the last couple of weeks that have been talking about Harrison Ford and his career, and many of the people on these podcasts talk about how they've revisited some of Harrison Ford's previous works and the other Indiana Jones movies. And what I've been hearing on a couple of these shows from people is going back and watching that Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull 10 years later. And now that there's a little bit of distance and a little bit of perspective, they said, not that it's a fantastic film, but they said it's probably better than you remember it now that you've had some time to distance yourself from it. And what most people have been saying repeatedly is, the first hour of that movie is fantastic. The second hour is where it really falls down. And that was my memory of it as well. But I am going to give it another chance in the not too distant future, but not today.
The interesting thing about Harrison Ford for me is that he played all these iconic characters back in the day. You know what I mean? How do you take Han Solo and make him be Indiana Jones? Like, it ain't going to work, right? And it did. And the thing was, there was never any crossover for me. I'd watch Raiders and I never at any point thought, that's Han Solo. I didn't.
Right.
That's Indiana Jones. Like, it was just great how he pulled that off. But then along came The Force Awakens. And I felt when I watched that I wasn't looking at Han Solo. I felt like I was just looking at an old Harrison Ford. I don't know. Yeah. There was just something missing. And it's not like that all of a sudden he's gotten older and he's lost his talent. Because you and I have mentioned before the show Shrinking that's on Apple TV Plus. And he's on that. And he's fantastic. He plays a completely different character on there. So I don't know. It's just like, I don't know if he's just kind of given up on those characters or what it is. But I don't know. That's just my take. So anything else that you were able to get to?
I had a chance to watch a documentary.
For 40 days and 40 nights, he watches documentaries. He likes to learn about the world. It's Derek's Documentaries. Derek's Documentaries.
What was the documentary about?
Actually, it just occurred to me when you were playing the song.
Mm-hmm.
I watched I watched a documentary last week that I forgot to talk about. So since I got a light week this week, I'll jump into that one first.
Sure.
So last week, I watched on Netflix the Arnold Schwarzenegger documentary. It's 3 parts. I believe it's just called Arnold. And it's 3 parts. The first part is called Athlete. The second one is called Actor. And the third one is called American. And in the third one, it's all about his political career and stuff.
Right.
And it was quite good. I as a fan of Arnold Schwarzenegger, I sort of knew the broad strokes of his history, but it was quite good. So if you have Netflix and you haven't had a chance to watch that Arnold Schwarzenegger documentary, I would encourage you to do so. He's very candid. He doesn't shy away from some of the problems and issues that have come out of his life and his marriage and things of that nature. He talks openly about using steroids when he was a younger man to help bulk up, which was the norm at the time. So it's very candid, and it was quite good. And because he's been in the public eye so much, they have so much footage and so many interviews that it's not just a modern, current, old man talking head, blah, blah, blah. They have all this old footage. So it was quite good. But the new one that I watched this week...
Hold on. I just want to back up a second. That just sounds fascinating because Arnold Schwarzenegger is just an amazing guy. When you think about, like, he was so good as an athlete. I mean, we're not talking about, like, you know, he was just a good bodybuilder. He was the greatest bodybuilder that ever lived. Yeah. It's just phenomenal, right? And then he becomes an actor. You couldn't even pronounce his last name, let alone spell it. And then I remember when he made Terminator, one of the biggest concerns that James Cameron had directing him was you can't understand what he's saying. Like, he can't even deliver his lines with that heavy accent. There's no way this guy's going to become a star, but he did. And so he became like just so charismatic and so popular as an actor. And then finally to round things out as a politician. You know, he was really successful as well, like, you know, in California and stuff. And he's kind of shown the last couple of years that he's like a principled Republican. There ain't many of them around, that's for sure these days. Mm-hmm. So he's such a fascinating person.
It was a really good documentary. Yeah,
that was on Netflix, you said?
I believe it's Netflix. Yeah,
I got to check that out.
It dropped a couple of weeks ago, so people may have already had a chance to watch it. I forgot to mention it last week, but anyway. And then I watched a brand new one that dropped on Disney just a couple of days ago, and it's just called Stan Lee, and it's about the history of Stan Lee, the founder of Marvel Comics.
Oh, you would have loved that one.
Yeah, again, I as a comic book nerd, I've read a lot of stuff about Stan Lee. There have been a number of books put out about the history of Marvel Comics, so I knew a fair amount. So I didn't get a lot of new stuff out of this, and I found that it really focused a lot on Stan Lee's early life, and then by the time he actually started Marvel Comics, like, that's sort of the end of the documentary, and they just sort of gloss over a few of the very high points. And I thought to myself, like, that to me as a comic book guy is more what I'm interested in. I was a little disappointed that they didn't spend more time on that part of it.
Maybe just to show you that he had that whole other part of his life.
I guess, you know,
because he was older, when he started the comic book thing. Like, it was already up in years, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, but no, I mean, I enjoyed it. Unlike the Arnold Schwarzenegger one, Stan Lee did not have as much footage of himself as a young man, so they used like a computer animator did like cartoon sort of 3D images of like what they envisioned the office would look like, and so they had sort of a cartoony style to it, and they kept using these little cutaways, which I personally thought seemed a little cheap. Like they just sort of, like, I'm sure they were quite difficult to do. But I just didn't like the look of them so much. And with that in mind, it was like, I thought the documentary was okay, but I felt it really was lacking.
And for me, Stan Lee was never a big part of my childhood, because the comic books I used to read, I've mentioned before, I like the funny ones. I like Richie Rich and stuff like that. And I always loved movie adaptations, and I like the Star Wars comics and Battlestar Galactica, but was never really into Stan Lee. But I always remember Stan Lee from the memories that I did have of him. He always included a little blurb at the front, I think it was, of the comics. And it always seemed to be pretty socially inclusive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't remember what he called it, something like Stan's
Soapbox.
Yeah. And he would just talk about how, you talk about things like back in the 70s and 80s that you didn't really talk about that much. Mm-hmm. And I always respected him for that. I thought it was pretty cool. So nice. I'll have to maybe check out both of those documentaries. That's awesome.
I would start with the Arnold Schwarzenegger one. It was much better.
Okay, I will. So, Derek, it's the summer. And as you know, I spent a lot of time up at the trailer with the family. So this past weekend we went up and I got all unpacked and, everything. And then after dinner, we were settling in to watch a DVD. Now keep in mind, I've got this little 24-inch TV that has a DVD built right into the side of it. You just put the disc in and then you watch it. So I've always thought I'm inviting trouble with this thing. It just feels like these things are just destined to break down, sooner rather than later. Well, sooner came this past weekend. So the DVD mechanism gave out and it stopped working. And the thing is, up there's no cable. There's no internet at the trailer. It's really secluded where my trailer's. Heck, we're right near where they filmed the movie Meatballs. So it's kind of like sacred ground for me, out there. But anyway, so once the DVD player goes, there's no TV. There's nothing. So I had to make a drive into the nearest town, and I went to the local Walmart. Well, guess what, Derek? I learned something. They don't make TV-DVD combos anymore.
Yeah, well, and that's exactly why.
Everything is smart TVs now. Everything relies on your ability to have access to the internet. Actual physical media is going the way of the dinosaur.
Yep.
It's crazy. But the thing is, I need it. I don't have the internet access at the trailer. I still need physical DVDs, and a DVD player if I want to watch anything when I'm up there. And the other thing, too, that I noticed is nobody wants small TVs anymore. It's the bigger the better, But when you're in a small RV trailer, I need a 24-inch TV. Good luck with that. I really struggled. So I ended up finding a 24-inch TV finally. And I got a separate DVD player and hooked them up. So anyway, we're back in business.
Crisis averted.
Yeah. But it made me realize one thing, how much physical media is just going to be a thing of the past.
Yeah.
It really is. I don't know. I guess you can keep it as a collectible, but you know what I mean? Other than that, it doesn't have a lot of practical value, but I still rely on it.
Assuming that you've got a player, it's we've talked about this before. I have VHS tapes, but my VHS player doesn't really work very well. So to your point, if I can get the damn thing to work and hook it up to a TV, which is becoming more and more difficult given the age of the VCR and the way they used to connect to old school TVs, if it ever stops being compatible with a modern TV, then yeah, there's absolutely no value in keeping it short of a paperweight or a memorabilia.
Yeah, just a collectible, because with more and more of these streaming services like Pluto TV, and Tubi and stuff that have all this old stuff on it, you don't even need it anymore. It's all out there. So anyway, time for this.
Here's your dad joke of the week.
I thought, since we're talking about social media this week, Derek, that I'd do a social media dad joke for you.
Okay.
All right. So, Derek, my ex updated her Facebook profile pic to a photo of her standing on the edge of a cliff. So I poked her. Is poking even a thing on Facebook?
I was going to say, I think the fact that you poked her is why she dumped you in the first place.
That was a thing, though, wasn't it? You poke?
Yeah.
I am really a dad joke with all this stuff. Oh my God, jeez.
Kelly Clarkson!
In your face, in the face.
Cole got to be, you know,
And we're gonna do a police lineup.
Back yourself a pro slick. You get that gray matter back before you get TCB in, man.
The real money's in fart jokes.
Lego down and smack 'em, yak 'em.
Well, what do you expect? They're Canadian.
Why are you always in such a bloody rush, man?
But he has a
Yeah, looky here. I can dig some of that grease to chomp it on some butter, drag it through the gun.
Uncle
Ooh, I'm glad that's not me.
I hate to break it to you, lady, but you're sucking on my arm.
All right, so this week we're going to do something a little bit different. We're not going to review a movie. We're not going to talk about a TV series. We're not going to do a top 5 list. Instead, we're going to talk a little bit about social media and the impact that it's had on pop culture. And this is going to be really interesting for me because I'm the old guy, you know. So, Derek, maybe you can just kind of start us out a little bit because you're always the one that's kind of educating me on the new stuff.
I was thinking this could be our absolute shortest show ever because neither one of us are social media experts by any stretch of the imagination. But I do think we can both bring a certain perspective to it based on our interactions with social media and given our extensive histories with just entertainment and media in general, right? Like, because we grew up in an era where these things didn't exist, we were around as they were introduced, as things have changed, as they have evolved, as some of them have come and gone. And we can provide a little perspective of, you know, once upon a time it was this, as opposed to this is where it seems to be now, or this is where it seems to be going. But I think we can probably both agree there's a lot of social media platforms that neither one of us are on, or that neither one of us, despite having some access to them, aren't using them as frequently as many other people in different demographics, mostly younger people, are doing today. So this
80% of people spend 5 hours a day on average on social media. Back in our day, that was TV time.
Yes.
You know, so just like you said, like how, you know, certain people use it and how things have evolved, like it's shifted from instead of spending time watching TV, instead your time is on social media, you know?
But I think it's important to provide some classification or definition to what we're talking about social media. I think for most people, especially older people, when you say social media and they say, oh, I spend 5 hours on social media, I think they're talking about things more like Facebook, where it's just that endless scroll of, you know, people posting stuff. You know, like I know I'm on Facebook more than, say, I'm on Twitter or Instagram, whereas other people I know who are younger, even my brother, who's not that much younger than me, he spends way more time on Instagram and way less time on Facebook. So I think part of it is what you're trying to get out of it, and which I mean, that's the whole key to social media, which we'll get into in a little bit more. But
well, I think
it's important to define it, right? Like, are we talking all social media platforms like that are currently available in any way, shape, or form, or are we really just saying it's Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter? Like, these are your biggest ones. They're the biggest kids on the playground. That's what we're talking about exclusively. And I think that potentially has a lot to do with when you talk about these numbers, some of the numbers being so ridiculously high.
I think we could pretty much stick to those ones, and I think they would probably pretty much fall into that, you know, 80% of people spending, you know, 5 hours average the majority of them would be on those, I would think. But for me, like pop culture or social media has always been about connecting. But pop culture is very social, I think, by its very nature. You know what I mean? Like it's all about how we share our love of, I don't know, movies and songs and TV shows. Like, we always did this growing up. We always shared how much we loved pop culture, just on a smaller scale. I mean, you were pretty much restricted just to your immediate friends, you know? And the thing was, if you ever wanted to connect with anyone who shared your love of a certain type of pop culture, like, you had to go to conventions or stuff like that, if they even existed. And they weren't as prevalent years ago. So in July of 1991, I went to the Fangoria Weekend of Horrors. There was no social media back then. And that being said, I thought, funny enough, I recently found someone on YouTube that posted a home video of the entire weekend of the Fangoria Weekend of Horrors from 1991. talk about a trip down memory lane. So I watch it, and there's like Tom Savini walking around the vendor area, just talking to people and smoking too, by the way, which I thought was funny. Just such different times. So for me, that's sort of like where the two are kind of connected. The fact that we always shared our love of pop culture just with small groups. Now we can share it with bigger groups. And it was a real sort of eye-opener for me as social media came on the scene to realize, oh, I'm not the only one that loves this, stuff. I'm not the only one that loves WKRP in Cincinnati. There's a whole group out there of people that do as well. And so in that sense, I thought it just kind of opened up a lot of the world.
Yeah, you hear a lot of times people talk about finding your people or finding your family. Mm-hmm. You can't choose the family you've been born into, but you can choose a family. You can choose your peers. You can choose your friends. You can choose a group that has similar interests or beliefs or whatever. And the internet has certainly made it possible for more and more people to reach out and through the power of the internet find people that share their ideology, their fandom, whatever it may be. And that has certainly opened up a lot of doors in many cases for the better for many people for many reasons. One of the things I thought was interesting about what you were just talking about is this idea of sharing. And whereas honestly, that's never really been my interest in pop culture. Like I'm not really interested outside of this podcast, of course, about sharing with people like these are my interests, these are my hobbies, that kind of thing. I'm more interested in the other way. I want to know about the things I want to know about. So, and that's really where I see social media has affected pop culture the most. Is previously, like when we were growing up, if a movie was coming out, if you were lucky, you maybe saw a trailer once before something else that you went to see in the theater, and that was sort of it. It's like, well, this movie's coming out, and that's all you knew. Maybe there was an article in something like later on in something like a Premiere Magazine or Entertainment Weekly, or maybe your local newspaper did a little write-up, but that was it. Whereas now, it's practically, if not completely impossible for a movie to come out where people who are interested don't already know every single person that's attached to it, with the actors, who they're playing, what they get paid, how many days they're on the set, what their costumes look like, where they're actually shooting it. Like all of these things are now made available through social media, not necessarily made available, but can be found and shared through social media. And that's always been more the kinds of things I've been interested in, and not to that, nth degree. You always hear me talking about how I don't like trailers, I don't like spoilers. Yeah. But at the same time, so for example, Indiana Jones, we watched this weekend. So I've still not watched the trailer, but as soon as we got home from watching the movie, it was pretty late, went to sleep. And then the next day when I had some free time, I was on the internet all day long looking through things. I wanted to know about how did they do these scenes and who wrote this? And they had this person polish the script, and who is this performer? What else have they been in? And I was able to go to social media, and there was just this insane wealth of knowledge. Knowledge definitely with a small K for knowledge, because a lot of it was just totally useless knowledge. But they were things as a fan I was interested in, and I now had access to that 30 years ago I would never have had that kind of access. I would just, if I had these questions, they would live on as questions forever, unless the kind of thing you talked about, like I went to a convention and you had an opportunity to talk to these people. Whereas now with the internet and social media, everything's out there. Whether you want it or not, it's available, and that has definitely changed the way that the people can and do interact with pop culture whether it be movies or music or TV or what have you.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you mentioned the thing about finding your people. That's a good point. Finding other people that love the same stuff that you do. Because on one hand, that could be good, but on the other hand, it can tend to polarize people.
Oh, very much.
And we've really seen this with social media. Like, generally speaking, with most notably with politics, we've seen it, but also in regard to pop culture as well. Like you see all this online hate for things like Star Wars: The Last Jedi or Nickelback or things like that. But I think all the thing with social media is it's driven. Some people are conspiracy theorists, right? And they're like, oh, social media is there to bend your thinking, and no, you know what social media is there for? It's the same thing it's there that everything else is there for. to make money. That's it. Yeah. They want to make money. So in order to make money, they have to get eyeballs on content, because if they can get eyeballs on content, then they can sell ads for that content. And that's all it is. Well, how do we get more engagement? How do we get more eyeballs on content? Let's put an algorithm in place that figures out what you like to look at and give you more of it. And so, and that's why my wife used to always joke around, because she's like, if I ever grab your phone and I look at your Facebook, it's so different than mine is. And she'd always say, you know, like you're all these things are coming up. She's like, why is there Happy Days on there, WKRP in Cincinnati, or things? Because that's the stuff that I engage with. So Facebook's algorithm just keeps feeding me more of it, because it knows I'm going to click on it and I'm going to be engaged with it. And I'm going to look at it. And it does the same for her. You know, hers will look different than mine. And this we've seen in politics. It's not that they're driving you to, you know, back a certain political party or something, or look, you know, think of a certain thing, you know, topics or anything like, you know, issues politically. It's just that if you're clicking on that thing, it's just going to keep feeding it to you. Now, the end result is we end up being polarized, you know, but it's really, at the end of the day, it's all driven by money. That's what I think.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if the absolute beginnings of these platforms started from a desire to make money.
No, but once you get a taste of it, it's hard to go back.
I think it very quickly when there's a clear line between how can this thing that I am working on building, creating, generate revenue, it's pretty hard to turn back. It's that Pandora's box. Once it's open, there's no closing it.
And it's not just like you know, greed at the top. That's a big part of it. But you start hiring people. You know how business works. You hire a staff. You got to maintain that staff. How do you maintain it? You got to generate more revenue. You got to generate more sales. How do you do that? Engagement. And that's all it is. It's a simple business machine, really. But one thing that's always interested me since social media has come out is this notion of things going viral.
Yeah.
You know, because back when I was growing up, like back in like the 70s and 80s, going viral was everyone lined up around the block to go see Jaws or Star Wars.
Yeah.
That was viral. But like now it's totally different. You can reach so many more people, and it can just be something like, rather than like Spielberg's Jaws, which takes a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of talent to create, you can easily create, or people can easily create content that is just crap. I mean, there's so much garbage out there, but it just goes viral for whatever reason. Just people share it and it just goes around, and you know. So I mean, getting stuff out is easier than ever. That's for sure, from a content perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, sort of circling back, you were talking about politics. That's one of the things where I've seen on various TV shows, some fictional and some real accounts, where because, especially in the U.S., because politicians have limits on how much money they can spend on certain advertising in certain ways, if you can get something related to your campaign to go viral, it's basically becomes free advertising. And so that's the silver bullet for anything that's trying to generate revenue or get eyeballs, is if you can have it go viral, then you gain that. And often number of views, number of clicks directly translates into number of dollars, or in the case of politics, number of votes, number of people who are influenced by what it is you're talking about. And I think that's sort of a good segue into the idea of an influencer. And that's one of the things that social media has added to our culture that hadn't been there to that level before. You know, when we were growing up, influencers were basically limited to reputable news people. You would read a newspaper, or you would watch
a magazine.
You would watch the nightly news, and a reputable authority figure would talk about something, and that was, or would review something, or give you their opinion on it, and you would, because you respect that person and they have this credibility behind them, that was how something was influenced. Whereas now it simply comes down to clicks. How many clicks on the link? How many eyeballs on the page? What are the total views? What are the total, you know, how many people visit it per day, per minute, what have you? And you have people who have become influencers, where it's like they are now famous for being famous, and in many cases, some of them can make a lot of money doing it. It's like there's video. I think you and I was listening to one of our old podcasts. You were saying that your kids would watch videos of like people opening toys or of people talking about video games and stuff, and it's like some of these influencers have
like 25 million views or something. Like, what the hell? Like, it's just crazy.
Or a ridiculous number of subscribers. And you have a lot of people who are famous, whether it's musicians or actors or models or people who became famous for having some talent or ability in some field that have then been able to parlay that into being an influencer and earning money simply by cashing in on their fame. And that's nothing new. I mean, endorsements have always been around. Like athletes have constantly done endorsements, and obviously that has blown up over the last 30 to 40 years. You hear about actors going overseas and doing like a commercial for a liquor or a deodorant commercial, and it's like, oh yeah, we're going to send Harrison Ford to Germany and have him phonetically say the words, and he's going to tout a brand of loafers, and you're like, well, that sounds dumb. It's like, yeah, but they paid him $1 million. Oh, okay. Now with the invention of YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, it's like people can just throw these videos up, and it can literally be anyone. So, I mean, hell, look at us. We're literally anyone. We have a podcast.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how much of an influence we have over people, but literally anyone can do it. It's just a matter of who's able to do it successfully enough, who has the right gimmick, is in the right place at the right time, is saying the right thing, is reaching the right audience. And sometimes that's just a matter of what do we think people want to hear. You can pander to people, or you can do it the other way and try and give them a genuine, fresh take on something.
Yeah, I think, in the past, you had to have access to these studios and stuff like that. So like you said, it's kind of leveled the playing field in the sense that, almost anybody can get out there and do stuff. In the past, it required, talent. Also, you had to have talent. Not to say that, a lot of these influencers and stuff don't have talent, but I mean, some of the YouTube stuff that my kids watch, it's just, this guy's like screaming. It's just, they're playing a game and they're yelling. And it's like, okay, that got 50 million views. What the hell? Like, I don't understand some of this stuff. But you're right. Like, we would never have had an opportunity to get out and do this. But I think the other thing too, that's kind of cool with social media is that, 20 years ago, I used to do a lot of radio, as you know, in the past. And when I used to do radio, it was broadcasting, which meant, by its very definition, it was broadcast. It was put out to the public.
Yeah, so one-way communication.
Yeah, very much one way. But so there's sort of two aspects of that. Number one is when you're putting stuff out, sort of in a broad sense, it has to appeal to everyone. So it'd be very, really hard for us to do a radio show on, Gen X pop culture. It's just not going to work. It has to appeal to more people. But with social media, the opposite is true. You want to be niche, as niche as possible. I remember when I first got into podcasting, I started with Dear Mr. Fantasy, my fantasy baseball podcast. And the key for our success in that show wasn't the fact that it was a show about baseball. No, that wasn't good enough. It wasn't even about fantasy baseball. It was not even fantasy baseball with humor. It was fantasy baseball with humor and lots of swearing. Like, it was such a niche thing that you could never have done that in radio and got away with it. So, sort of things really did change. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I think, so a couple of points that you brought up. One is the access to technology to create these things, whether it's videos or podcasts. Like, most of this stuff now can be done by yourself from a mobile phone with just a download of a couple of apps, and in many cases, completely free apps.
As opposed to the old days when you had to have a huge studio and you had to have a mixing board and somebody in another room doing the mixing and the editing and everything.
So there's that. And then the other thing related to that, I think, is that people's acceptance of lower quality. Whereas in the past, when it was coming from a professional studio, anything less than professional quality was dismissed out of hand because you knew, well, this isn't from, quote, the authority.
Yeah.
But as the tools became more readily available, people became more accepting of lower quality and lower standards because they realized, well, if anyone can do this, you can't necessarily judge the book by its cover. Just because the video is a little wobbly or grainy or out of focus doesn't necessarily mean that the content that's being presented or the opinion that's being presented isn't valid. You know, and initially that was a good thing, right? It sort of counters the point you made, where in your social media feed now you just get the things you like. Well, at the start of this, as the technology became more available, you now had alternate viewpoints. You know, it wasn't just old white men telling people what to do. And if you were part of a group that had previously not been represented in mainstream media, you could now, back to what we said before, find your people. We can hear, like, what do other people that look like me, sound like me, have had the same opportunities or lack of opportunities? Like, how are they, what are their opinions? And so I think as the tools became available and more people could broadcast their ideas and opinions, that opened up the doors a lot as well.
Yeah, I've always been an audiophile. I've always wanted stuff to sound good. But I think you're right, especially when things like podcasting and even YouTube first came out. You're right. It was okay to not have great quality. You know, like it kind of added to the appeal of podcasting, I think, when it first came out. But I mean, you know, hopefully things are changing a bit and people are wanting to have, you know, higher quality stuff. Well, it's funny when social media first got started too, if you think about it, pop culture content sort of drove social media. You know, like people on social media would talk about movies and stuff like that, but
or
just
sports.
or sports or whatever. But like now what you're mentioning, the flip side has happened now, where social media content has influenced pop culture because those influencers and things like someone like Justin Bieber, he got his start playing his songs on YouTube out of his house in London, Ontario, and it went viral, and that's a great example of social media content sort of driving pop culture.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
So one of the things I want to mention, because I remember when Yancey was on the show, he used to talk about this all the time. One of the biggest things when I think of, like, you know, social media and pop culture is memes.
Yeah.
So he used to always say, "Oh, I love memes." I remember we did a show where we had a topic of like our things we liked or something like that, or like I don't know. And he was like, "I like dank memes." And I'm like, "What the hell is a dank meme?" Like, I didn't even know what it was. You know, I'm the classic old guy. But this idea of these memes in unto themselves have become pop culture items, you know?
Yeah.
And people share them and stuff like that. I don't know. Do you like memes? Do you share them? Are you into them? Is it a thing? Like, for me, I just kind of let them go. But
yeah, it's and I think that the term has become used more broadly to define a wider spectrum of things. Like, I can recall years ago the meme, like someone talked about a meme. It was usually a still image with like maybe a stock photo, and then it had, like, you know, writing on it that was sort of related to something. It was always, it's always this formula in some way, shape, or form. But now a meme is pretty much just anything that's on the internet that you might see circulating around. It could be a video meme, it could be a still picture, it could be an audio clip. And so the definition has become much broader. It's like back when we were younger and people said, like, "Oh, are you playing Nintendo?" And what they meant was, "Are you playing a home video game console?" But you know, one word started to have a broader definition, and I think that's one of the things with the term meme. It now encompasses a lot more stuff.
So one thing that I wanted to mention, being an older guy, because I think Facebook is like an older guy kind of thing.
Definitely, yeah.
One thing that kind of was a game changer, I got onto Facebook, like, I think it was back in 2007, early 2007. I got into Facebook, and it was like, okay, this is pretty good for connecting with people. But then when I discovered Facebook groups, that's when Facebook took off for me. That's when I just loved it, because I was able to, that's when I could connect with other people that I wasn't friends with that shared my interests.
Right.
And so I would find like a group. Like, so I remember back at the time, I was really into the show Lost. And I would talk to my friends and they were like, "I don't watch Lost." So I'm like, "Oh, okay. So, like, who do I talk to about this?" And I was able to find on Facebook like a group of people that just loved Lost. And we would all go in there and just share our theories of like that week's episode. Yeah. And it was like a game changer for me. That was like huge because it added so much to my love of the show to watch the show and then jump into the group and start talking with other people and trying to figure out what the hell was that all about, you know? And so I've always, like, especially early on, I always felt that Facebook groups were like a huge thing for me. Is that ever something you did?
Not to that extent. As you know, I'm big into comic books. So a lot of the groups that I'm attached to in Facebook are groups that buy and sell old comics. Again, it's that whole idea of finding your people. There are lots of comic book collectors online, and there are a lot of comic book sites. But because what I'm looking for is very specific, I'm looking for Batman comics between certain decades. Like, it's very niche within a niche. So I found that the groups have been very helpful to connect me with people who are either buying or selling the same kinds of things. But to your point, I have a number of broad interests, and a while back I was attached to a dozen different Dungeons and Dragons groups. But I did find that many of the groups had a lot of the same members, which was fine. But a lot of the groups tended to post a lot of the same articles and a lot of the same opinions. And I found that I almost had to find the very specific niche group within the group just to help filter out all the noise and say, like, well, I don't necessarily need to see everything, and I definitely don't need to keep seeing the same things over and over again. So that I found that was sort of how my personal use of it became, is to find that very niche. Who are my people that want to talk about or read about this? But to your point, as my interests changed or my knowledge, if I couldn't get the answers I wanted within these groups, I knew there were larger groups. And with Facebook, normally you have, at its most basic level, if you and I are going to be, quote, friends on Facebook, I have to send you an invite and you have to accept it. Like, there needs to be that reciprocation. Whereas with these groups, I don't know any of these people.
Yeah.
I just need to be accepted into the group, and bang, now we can have our thing. And so that, I think, has helped connect me with a lot of other people that I don't want to be friends with you in real life. I don't want you to see my pictures. I don't want you to see anything outside of what I'm posting in this group. And I like that it gives us that option.
One of the things I've really liked about social media in regard to the way I consume pop culture is, in the past, it was hard for me to connect with people because there'd only be a few people that I could kind of ask, like, what's a good TV show to watch or something?
Yeah.
And as now I can go on like Facebook or Twitter and say, what TV show should I binge watch next? And I can get hundreds of responses. And that was never possible before. And like some of them, then you start seeing like some of the same ones coming up again and again, like, okay, maybe I should check out that show. So that's one thing that I really like, is being able to put things out there and trying to get, people to give me their opinions on stuff even before I watch something. If you think about film Twitter and stuff like that, I never would have watched Ted Lasso, which I just loved. We just talked about it in a couple episodes back.
Yeah.
I never would have watched that show if it wasn't for this buzz that I heard on Twitter. Never would have. I wouldn't know, because none of my friends were talking about it. Then nobody that I know in my immediate circle of friends at work and socially, they weren't talking about it. It was just rather it was on social media. So you know what I mean? Like, it's been a good feeder for me even though I don't watch a lot of new stuff, as you know, but just to find different things to watch.
Yeah. One of the things that I want to circle back to, you sort of just touched on very briefly, was you had mentioned Justin Bieber and how he got his big break with viral videos by creating a video, posting it online, and it was like, here's an amateur thing, and he posted it on YouTube, and it got picked up and retweeted by some of the big names in the field,
right?
And away it went. And I think that music's definitely been one of those areas where social media has just catapulted it into a new way of doing things. And this comes back to when music and the internet came together with the idea of file sharing and Napster and all that stuff. Like, it goes all the way back to that, where the internet and social media have allowed musicians to showcase their abilities and promote themselves, either by like Bieber did, by creating their own material and performing it, or doing covers of other songs, or like even like you see things where this is a child prodigy drummer, or this is a child prodigy violinist, and they'll play something in a way that most of the general public maybe has never seen before. And in some cases, this can give them a huge break. Either it can just give them recognition, which as a performer, I got to imagine gives you a tremendous sense of satisfaction and sort of validates that what you've done and spent all this time doing, is worth something, more than just the value of knowing that you're good at it. But it's also, I remember when I want to say it was Facebook, I think it was Facebook or maybe even MySpace in the time, professional musicians, some got on board immediately. Like I can remember the band The Offspring. Remember them? They debuted in the mid 90s, Come Out and Play. They had
Come Out and Play. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Great album. And when they put out, I want to say it's their second or third album, they had a contest where if you went on their website, and it might have been their MySpace page. I can't remember if it was their actual official website or not. It was one of these things. If you went on their website and you downloaded their new single, which they made available for free, and all you had to do is give them your name and email address, and they let you download the song for free. And then after, I think it was available for like a month. And at the end of that month, everybody who downloaded it, all the names went into a draw, and they gave someone $1 million for literally going to their website and downloading the song for free. Somebody got paid $1 million. And I can remember at the time, the mainstream media lost their mind, and they're like, this band doesn't know what they're doing. They're wasting all this good money. Like, they are nutso. But it ended up becoming a viral sensation. It became one of those things where the event itself became news, and it just promoted their song and it promoted their album. And yeah, they gave away $1 million, but they got way more than $1 million worth of advertising out of that. And their record sold all these, well, I guess it would have been a CD at the time, sold all of these copies, and they made all this money. And it was like, here's an opportunity where the members of the band and the member of their promotional team saw the opportunity to use these new tools in a way that they hadn't been used before to promote this music and this art to an audience in a way that had never been done before. And I think that's the best part about what social media does, is as the technology and the tools continue to change, art in its many forms, and I mean, like we've said, some of the YouTube videos you and I probably wouldn't call art, but others might argue that they are, whether it's music or performances or what have you. It gives the artists opportunities they'd never had before to put their art in front of an audience that may never have had it previously, had a chance to see it or hear it or experience it. And I got to think, as a culture, this has been very helpful, right? Like when I was younger, if I wanted to see great art, I had to go to a museum. If I wanted to hear something I'd never heard before, I had to buy a record or find a channel on the radio that played it. And in many cases, you would have to listen at a certain time, a certain day for a certain program. It wasn't this on-demand everything. Now, with the internet and with social media, you can literally follow groups that are dedicated to promoting up-and-coming artists, or if you're a fan of someone who's done something in the past, you can follow them and go, well, what is your next thing? I don't want to miss it. This is an important part of pop culture and art that I want to be a part of. And that's, I believe, in my opinion, that is definitely for the better. I mean, there are certainly extremes that go overboard, but I think the idea in general is great.
You and I think it might have been like a year or two ago, we did an episode on music videos. And we were talking about how back in our day, you had to watch like Friday night videos or MTV, or here in Canada, Much Music, to watch music videos. But now I was like, where'd they all go? And like you had filled me in, they're all on YouTube. Yep. YouTube is the new sort of outlet for all that stuff. So, so speaking of YouTube, I think it's important that we kind of wrap things up with YouTube, because I recently bumped into somebody. And we got talking, and he said to me, he said, oh, I listened to your podcast. He goes, I went back and listened to an old show of yours, and you were talking about the old movie Meatballs, because I tend to do that a bit.
I was going to say, well, that was one of every 900 episodes. Yeah.
And he's like, so I went online and I looked it up, and I found it on YouTube. I found the whole movie, and I watched it.
That's how I watched it.
And he's like, it was so good. He's like, it reminded me of my youth, and I remembered that movie. And so YouTube is such a great place, at least it started out for me, to be a great place to watch old content. I could find old movies, old clips of TV shows, old documentaries and stuff like that I just really loved. And it got me thinking, back in the late 90s, I had a TV show here in Midwestern Ontario. Mm-hmm. And my buddy and I that I did the show with, we got talking. He does some of the drops on our show. Brian Longmire. He's the morning man on the beach, on the radio station. And he and I were talking recently. We're like, could you imagine if we had YouTube now? Or like back then when we did our show? Like, things would have been so different. We could have put our content out instead of just being in, Midwestern Ontario. We could have put our content out across the world. Like I think people today, content creators today, have so much more at their disposal of how the reach that they can make. Content creators like my kids watch Mr. Beast. He's this guy. This guy gets like tens of millions of views on every single video he puts out. And his videos are dumb. People are going to hate me for saying it, but his videos suck. He has no talent. And he's just raking in the money because of the views that he gets. I'm taking my kids to see Dude Perfect in Toronto this weekend. I'm going to surprise the boys. They love the Dude Perfect, but these guys only exist because of YouTube. So YouTube is like a massive thing right now, And my son's
YouTube's been pretty massive for a long time there, bud. Yeah,
but it's crazy how it is now driving the content of pop culture, as opposed to what my view of YouTube was like. I can watch old pop culture on it. Now it's like, no, it's driving pop culture. It's becoming the major content creator. So my kids create their own videos and they put them on there. And my youngest son, he got picked on at school. He got bullied. He was made fun of because he only has like 29 subscribers on his channel. And I'm like, 29 subscribers. If we had 29 subscribers, I'd be ecstatic for our podcast.
It'd be triple what we had last week.
Exactly. Man, bullies suck. I hate them. But I don't know. It's funny how all of social media morphed from being a reflection of pop culture to a driver of pop culture, I guess is the point I'm trying to make.
No, that's fair.
So way to wrap things up, pop culture, the social media good for pop culture or bad for pop culture?
I'm gonna say good, but it like anything else, I'm gonna use that line from the movie Blade Runner, because that's right in our wheelhouse. When they talk about the robots, the replicants, and they're like, he says replicants are like any other machine. If they're either a benefit or a hazard. If they're benefit, it's not my problem. I think social media is sort of like that. Like any other technology, it can be a benefit or a hazard. It can be good. It can be bad. I think social media, if used, which I believe the majority of people do, as intended, is great. It opens up so many doors and it gives opportunities to so many people, and it helps spread information that may not otherwise be available to people that need to hear it. But like anything else, it can be abused. It can be used to target people. It can be used for hate. And I think that's just the nature of humanity, that there's always going to be people that want to do wrong when everyone else is trying to do right. So overall, short answer, I think it's great.
Yeah, even as an old guy, I'd say overall it's pretty great. If for no other reason, I can just go on YouTube and watch old stuff anytime I want. So
there you go.
For that, I like it. All right, let's have some
fun with Caveman.
All right, my man, it's over to you. What kind of trivia do you got lined up?
All right, we're going nuts and bolts here. This is less pop culture and more social media. So I'm just going to ask you a bunch of questions about important dates in the history of social media.
Okay.
I'm going to give you a lot of latitude on these because none of the answers are before 2000. It's all about when was social media coming into effect and those kinds of things. So we'll hit you up and, we'll go from there. So first question. Instagram. We've already talked about Instagram. When did Instagram launch? I'll give you within a year.
I would say 2015.
No, way earlier than that. October 6th, 2010. So Instagram in some form or another has been available for 13, 14 years now. Like, it is not going anywhere, and it is still around. All right. Who has the most followers on Instagram right now?
I would say Taylor Swift.
It's not Taylor Swift. I'll give you a hint. It's an athlete.
Oh, wow. I would tend to think it might be a basketball player, but I don't know.
It's the Portuguese professional footballer Cristiano Ronaldo. He has over 589 million followers as of June 2023.
God, jeez Louise.
Yeah. Again, you got to remember, worldwide with social media, right?
Yeah,
like we are very North American centric, US centric.
True.
So when you said basketball, I thought, you're not thinking big enough. So, okay, we're going to go back in time. One of the very first social media platforms to launch was called MySpace. Can you give me a guess in what year, within a year, what year did MySpace launch?
I want to say it was like 2001.
Close. August 1st, 2003.
Ooh, okay.
All right. How about Twitter? When was the first tweet sent within a year?
Twitter would be around 2006.
Yes, March 21st, 2006. There you go. All right.
Look at me.
Which celebrity was the first? This is like pop culture Hollywood celebrity. Was the first celebrity to have 1 million followers on Twitter? I'll give you a hint. It happened in April 2009. So this was someone who was big in 2009.
This is probably not what you would expect, but it was Ashton Kutcher.
Oh my God, you know it.
Yeah.
Wow, good job.
Yeah. I remember he was huge on Twitter when it came out. Yep.
Again, it's like so many things. Some people just get it. It was clear that he was the right place, the right time, the right guy. He understood it, and he was able to. I was not shocked, but surprised when I found that out. Okay, let's change platforms. TikTok, a little newer. Okay. When did TikTok launch in its original form?
Ooh, TikTok. It seems like it's really, really, really new, but I'm going to say it's been around for almost, I would say 2015.
Very close. I'm going to give it to you. It's September 2016, and it originally launched in China. So you were within a year. I'll give you that one. Okay. This was interesting. Who has the most TikTok followers? Let me ask you, before you answer that, let me ask you, are you on TikTok? Do you follow TikTok? Do you post TikTok?
Not at all. Not at all.
But you are familiar with the platform?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Short little snippet videos.
Yeah, okay.
Again, I'll go with Taylor Swift.
No. Absolutely, not even in the right vein. So I didn't realize this, and I was, again, this was one. Okay, so the guy's name, and I'm totally sure I'm mispronouncing it, is Khaby Lame or Khaby Lame. He's a Senegalese-born Italian social media personality. He's known for his TikTok videos in which he silently mocks overly complicated life hack videos. He has 161 million followers.
Insane. Again,
do you know who I'm talking about?
Never heard of it.
Oh, it's like, so basically someone will show some complicated way of doing something that's way over complicated, and then he just does it the easy way and then throws his hands forward like, da-da, that's how you do it. And I was like, oh, that's who that guy is. I see his videos reposted all the time. I see them on Facebook. I see them on Twitter. I see them in TikTok. There's tons of them. Yeah. No, I couldn't believe that he's that. I like, you forget how these platforms are international and just people can become so famous. So anyway, okay. Let's move on to the bigger players in the playground. Okay. When was Facebook created?
2004.
Yes, February 4th, 2004. Yep. Okay. If you've seen the Facebook movie and you've read anything about it, Facebook was originally a private thing that was only available to select group. When did it open up and become available to anyone who was 13 years old or older?
Ooh, it would have been probably about 6 years. I would say 2010.
No, you're way off. Only 2 years later, September 26, 2006.
So, it went public in 2006.
Yeah, again, like anything else, it went viral and it just exploded in.
Sorry, I misinterpreted that. I thought you were asking when it went public, like for stock.
Oh no, not like an IPO. No. That I don't have that at my fingertips. But your date was probably closer to the truth. Okay, last couple of questions are about YouTube. Okay. When did YouTube launch?
YouTube launched in 2005.
Yes, February 14th, Valentine's Day, 2005. All right, final question. What is the #1 YouTube video of all time?
Wow. I'm going to still go
12 billion, over to almost 13 billion views.
It's been a while, but I'm still going to go with Gangnam Style.
No.
Oh.
Gangnam Style's not even in the top 10 anymore.
Wow.
It's Baby Shark.
Oh, right. Of course. I should know that with my own kids.
Like, almost double the next one. The next one was the song Despacito. So I think Despacito was around 8 billion and this one's 12.7 billion. And it's just like, wow. Like the big thing, again, you got to remember international, right? Yeah. It needs to appeal to a broad audience. And with the Baby Shark, because it appeals to parents internationally, of course it's the #1. But yeah,
some of those dates I was pretty familiar with, and I might have surprised you with, because I remember doing a lesson plan with some of my students, because in my day life, I'm a college professor. So I actually had a lesson plan that I put together where I had students grab like pieces of paper that had like Facebook, TikTok and stuff, and they had to go up on the board and tape them where they thought they were in terms of when they launched. So a lot of it's kind of fresh in my mind, so that's why I got some of that stuff.
Well, you got a lot more of them than I expected you to. I
that's
mean,
probably why.
Obviously, we normally do trivia related to pop culture, which is a little more in our wheelhouse. Since we were doing social media, I felt let's just do old school nuts and bolts trivia with the dates.
Yep. So it makes fun. That was good. All right. So next week we're going to take a little bit of a break. We got
summer
some
vacation,
holidays.
man.
We got some holidays coming up.
Yep.
So you and I, we're hoping to get together next week too. That would be really, really nice if we can do that. But we're going to take a break next week. We'll try and get a best of show out there if we can. But until then, this is Chris McBride on behalf of myself and Derek Myers saying, have a good summer vacation. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time. Thanks for listening. This is Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations.
Thanks for listening to Pop Goes Your World. You can contact Chris and Derek at popgoesyourworld.com. Please take a minute and review the podcast on iTunes or wherever you download and listen to the show.